Hello again. In today's video, I will be going over the Truvision NVR-DVR calculator tool. This is a comprehensive tool that allows you to choose the proper recorder and storage for your project. There are questions that need to be answered to properly calculate the storage for your recorder. These are resolution, frame rate, motion activity, and days of storage. The first question we need to resolve is what resolution will you be recording at. Under the resolution drop-down tab, there are many options. The key ones that I want to point out are 5 megapixel, which is 2560 by 1920, 3 megapixel, which is 2048 by 1536, 1080p, which is 1920 by 1080p. This is at a 2.1 megapixel setting. We come down to 960p, which is 1.3 megapixel, 720p, which is right at about 1 megapixel, and then finally a 4CIF resolution, which is your basic analog resolution that you would receive from existing analog cameras in the field, and also any cameras that are going to be recorded, those analog cameras that are going to be recorded to an encoder. The next question that needs to be answered is, what frame rate do I want the camera to record at? Now, frame rates can vary from 1 frame a second all the way up to 30 frames a second. 30 frames a second is basically what the human eye can see. It is true frame recording, full frame recording. Not a good idea to record your cameras at 30 frames a second, seeing as though if I put 15 frames a second and recorded that right next to 30 frames a second, it would be very, very hard for you to tell which one was which. The standard in the industry today, what I normally run into on most of my specifications, is 7.5 frames a second, which is very, very good video. It's not choppy. You don't get the robot walk of people within the screen. It's primarily going to be perfect for pretty much any setup other than if you are looking at people trying to card count or do something sleight of hand with money. Obviously those higher end frame rates are for those job sites, but pretty much I start with 7.5 frames for most of our projects. And you go from 7.5 frames a second to what most customers are used to in the DVR world. In the DVR world, that's been the last, I guess, 20 years out there in the industry. Most people are recording between 1, 2, or 3 frames a second. So normally, as a starting point, I like to start pretty much all of my cameras recording at 7.5 frames. Okay, the next question that we need to answer is the percentage of motion recording on the camera or cameras. Basically, the default setting on our storage calculator is 100%. That basically means that this is your time-lapse setting. And for those of you who don't know the term time-lapse, it basically means that if I'm recording at 7.5 frames a second on camera number 1, and I just want to record at 7.5 frames a second all the time without having motion turned on the camera, then I would leave this setting at 100%. You're going to make changes to your motion percentage when you actually set up the camera to record only on motion activity. So there's been some studies in the field, and actually more along the lines of what I've set up for a number of years for customers, and you can draw some generalizations on what your motion detection is going to be. So what I've done over the years is, if I have an interior camera, I'm going to set that camera up to record on motion 30% of the time. I think this is actually a very safe number, considering that in a standard office environment, there's probably only going to be people in the office maybe 10 hours of the day, Monday through Friday. So basically you take the weekends out of the equation, and then you take the other 14 hours of the day, where there shouldn't be any motion activity in the field of view, and you're going to come in probably around 25%. So you want to add a little bit of motion to it just to make sure that you are covering those days. If I am setting up this camera for exterior viewing, I want to bump up that motion detection to 50% of the time, because the image on the exterior of a building is obviously going to have more change. You're going to have wind blowing, you're going to have clouds covering the sun, and then coming back into the field of view, changing the field of view, therefore creating a motion activity. So I would assume that you're going to have more motion activity on your exterior cameras. Now that we've gone over the key variables, let's run a real project scenario and see what we come up with. So I just walked the Orioles office building with their security director and came up with the following camera counts. Customer's looking for a 12 camera system with 8 interior cameras at 1.3 megapixel resolution, 7.5 frames a second, and they would like the cameras to record on motion. They also want 4 exterior cameras for their parking lots, so we're going to go with 3 megapixel cameras for more resolution in a larger area at 7.5 frames a second, recording at motion also. Customer has requested that the cameras record for 30 days. Okay, so let's take this information into the calculator and see what we come up with. So I've already named the project Orioles Building. The camera system is a 16 camera project, so I need to come in and actually and I want it to be a TVN21 recorder. So it's a TVN21. There's 16 cameras on the project. I can come in and manually name the cameras, and for this example I'm just going to do 1 just so you can see how it's done, but in the interest of time I'm just going to name the first camera. Now the way we had it set up, the first 8 cameras were interior to the building, and they were going to be recording at 1.3 megapixel. As we talked about earlier, 1.3 megapixel is 960p. So I select that option, 1280 by 960. I'm going to record at 7.5 frames a second. And for those cameras, because they're interior, I'm going to choose the 30% motion option. Now what I have here is my setup that I want for the first 8 cameras on the system. So I'm now going to come over and copy that same setting to the first 8 cameras. And now for my last 4 cameras, I want to record at 3 megapixel video at 7.5 frames a second. And there we go. So we mentioned earlier that for exterior cameras and motion detection, we only wanted to record those at 50% motion because there's going to be more information going on the screen. So as I change these, if you look down here to the right under storage capacity, it's actually changing the terabyte size that I need for the recorder. So if I change these to 50% motion, to get 30 days worth of storage, I need 4.3 terabytes on my recorder. Now, if I was designing this project, I would definitely want to put a little bit more on my recording for my recorder, so I'd probably be looking at like a 6 terabyte or 8 terabyte hard drive size to be careful. So if the customer then came to me and said, you know what, any way that you can make this job a little bit more cost effective, your answers to them would be, well, hey, if I can give you 15 days of recording, I can now sell you a 2 terabyte option instead of a 4 terabyte option. And obviously you would want to document that in your estimate that I'm giving you 15 days worth of recording. I like to give a range because you never know with motion detection. You want to basically tell them that you're going to give them 2 to 4 weeks of recording, something in an option like that. So now that I have my estimate set up, I can actually go in and print a report. And I think this is really important, because what I would do is I would put this into your job folder. So if I'm the salesperson or the estimator that is putting together this calculation, I can name all the cameras here. I can convert this to a PDF file and name it whatever I want to name it. And then at that point, I can now print that out, put it in the job file, so when the technician goes to the job site, they know that the camera 1 is the front door camera. It is going to be recording at this resolution, this frame rate, and that it is on motion detection. Now if this was at 100%, they would know that I'm setting the camera up at 7.5 frames a second, and I'm recording all the time, so I don't need to set up the camera for motion. To find the calculator, you just need to go to Interlogix.com, click on the video tab at the top left. You want to choose recorders under video categories. Arrow down to one of our newer recorders, which I always choose the NVR 21 Plus. And if I arrow down under downloads, you'll see the Truvision NVR Storage Bandwidth Calculator right here under Sales Tools and Interactive Content. Just keep in mind that it is Internet Explorer only, so if you try to bring this up in Google Chrome or something else, it's not going to work. So you want to use this in Internet Explorer, but you double click on this and then the download will start. That concludes this video on the Truvision NVR Storage Calculator. I thank you for your time, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel.